The Lumina station hung in the void like a
It's
diamond
alive.
somebody forgot
But
to put
how?
back in the jewelry box. All glittering panels and unnecessary architectural flourishes that screamed, "We have money, and we want you to know it." It was the kind of place where governments went when they wanted to pretend they were getting along, which, spoiler alert, they absolutely were not. Lieutenant Violet stood near the east entrance of the grand atrium, which was neither particularly grand nor much of an atrium, watching approximately 30 different species try not to start an intergalactic incident before lunch. Her uniform was crisp, her posture relaxed, and her eyes missed absolutely nothing. That was the thing about being human security at an event like this. Everyone assumed you were decoration until you weren't. The summit had been going for 3 days now, and tensions were running higher than the station's artificial gravity settings. Ambassador Theo was somewhere in the middle of that circus, doing what diplomats do best, smiling while being insulted in 8 different languages. Violet had to hand it to him. The man had patience that would make a monk weep with envy. "Pathetic," rumbled a voice that sounded like gravel being dragged across sheet metal. Violet didn't turn. She knew that voice. Commander Zoloth of the Kaharn Empire, a species that had built their entire cultural identity around being the biggest, meanest things in whatever room they occupied. He was nearly 8 feet of corded muscle, scales like organic armor plating, and an attitude problem that could be seen from orbit. The Kaharn had arrived on day 1 with all the subtlety of a meteor strike, making it abundantly clear that they considered humanity to be somewhere between amusing pets and potential livestock. They weren't alone in that assessment. Plenty of species looked at humans and saw soft skin, average height, and none of the natural weapons that made you a threat in polite society. No claws, no venom, no exoskeleton, no redundant organs. Just meat in clothes, really. Zoloth was currently holding court near the buffet table because, of course, the intimidation happened near the food, surrounded by 3 other Kaharn warriors who hung on his every word like he was reciting scripture. He was talking about humans, naturally, because that seemed to be his favorite topic, besides himself. "Look at them," he continued, gesturing toward where Theo stood speaking with a delegation of Forian merchants. "They break if you squeeze them. Their bones snap like dried twigs. They have 1 heart, 1 liver, 1 stomach. They are not built for survival, yet here they are, pretending to belong among real civilizations." One of his companions, a female Kaharn with scarring across her jaw that suggested she'd won several arguments the hard way, chittered in amusement. "I heard they cannot even regenerate limbs. Lose an arm, and it is simply gone." "Imagine," Zoloth said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "An entire species that can be permanently damaged. How do they even function as warriors? As hunters?" Violet kept her expression neutral, but mentally she was already composing the incident report she really hoped she wouldn't have to file today. The Kaharn weren't technically breaking any rules. Being an insufferable ass wasn't against summit regulations, unfortunately, but they were testing boundaries the way toddlers test gravity, by throwing things off high chairs. This was going to end badly. She could feel it in her bones, the same way you could feel a storm coming even when the sky was still clear. Across the atrium, a Feln delegate. They looked like someone had taken a praying mantis and given it delusions of grandeur, approached Theo with what passed for a friendly expression in their species. The Feln were traders, negotiators, the kind of beings who could sell ice to species that lived on frozen moons. They were good at reading rooms, which meant they definitely noticed the Kaharn commentary. "Ambassador Theo," the Feln said, its translator rendering the clicks and whistles into smooth standard. I trust you are finding the summit productive? Theo smiled, because that's what he did. The man could smile through an apocalypse. Quite productive, yes. Though I imagine the real progress will happen once we move past the posturing phase and into actual negotiation. The Feln's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement. Posturing is its own form of negotiation, Ambassador. Surely your species understands this. Oh, we understand it perfectly, Theo replied, his tone light, but his eyes sharp. We just prefer efficiency over theater. That was the moment Zoloth decided to make his presence everyone's problem. The Kaharn commander crossed the atrium in long strides that made the floor plates vibrate slightly, his entourage following like loyal hounds. Other delegates parted instinctively, giving the Kaharn a wide berth, the way small fish scatter when something with teeth swims by. Ambassador Theo, Zoloth said, managing to make the title sound like an insult. Still attempting to convince the galaxy that your kind deserves a seat at the grown-up table? Violet shifted her weight slightly, angling herself for a better view of the situation. Her hand didn't move toward her sidearm. That would be escalation, but her body language shifted from relaxed to ready in the space of a heartbeat. Old habits from old training that ran deeper than bone. Theo, to his credit, didn't flinch. Commander Zoloth, I wasn't aware the negotiations had become a competition for table placement. I was under the impression we were here to discuss mutual trade agreements and territorial boundaries. Mutual, Zoloth repeated, tasting the word like it was sour. That implies equality, human. Tell me, what exactly does your species bring to this table that couldn't be provided by a dozen others, with actual strength to back their claims? The atrium had gone quiet in that special way spaces do when everyone knows something interesting is about to happen, and nobody wants to miss it by breathing too loud. The Felon delegate took 3 very subtle steps backward. Smart bug. Theo's smile never wavered. We bring innovation, diverse perspectives, and a rather impressive track record of survival against odds that would have ended most species. But I suspect you're not actually interested in an itemized list, Commander. So why don't you tell me what you really want to say? Oh, Violet thought. Oh no. She started moving, weaving through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent months learning to navigate packed spaces without drawing attention. Zoloth's face twisted into something that might have been a smile, if smiles were supposed to make you think about your own mortality. What I want to say, Ambassador, is that your kind is weak, fragile. You are prey animals playing at being predators, and it would be amusing if it were not so insulting to actual warriors. Noted, Theo said calmly. I'll add that to the official summit record, right under your complaint about the catering temperature. Will that be all, Commander? The Kaharn delegates behind Zoloth made sounds that suggested they were not accustomed to watching their commander being handled with anything approaching sass. The scarred female took a step forward, but Zoloth raised one clawed hand, stopping her. Such confidence, the commander said softly, which was somehow more threatening than his earlier volume. Such bravado. Tell me, Ambassador, would you maintain that attitude if I demonstrated exactly how fragile humans truly are? Violet was close now, close enough to intervene if this went from verbal posturing to actual physical contact. She could see Theo's jaw tighten slightly, the only sign that he was finally registering actual danger. I would advise against making threats at a diplomatic summit, Commander, Theo said, his voice level but firm. It tends to reflect poorly on one's civilization. Zoloth laughed, a sound like rocks in a blender. Threats? No, Ambassador. Merely an observation. You humans talk much of your accomplishments, But talk is wind. Action is truth. He reached out, one massive hand extending toward Theo's shoulder in what could technically be interpreted as a gesture of camaraderie, but was definitely, absolutely, a dominance display wrapped in plausible deniability. Violet stepped into the space between them. Not dramatically, not with announcement or flourish. She simply moved, her body occupying the gap with the kind of timing that made it look almost accidental, like she'd been heading that direction anyway. And whoops, now she was in the way. "Commander," she said pleasantly, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby delegates, but not enough to seem like she was making a scene. "Ambassador Theo is needed for a scheduled briefing. If you'd like to continue this discussion, I'm happy to arrange a proper meeting through official channels." Zoloth looked down at her, way down, because even at her height she barely came up to his chest, and something flickered across his reptilian features. Surprise, maybe, that she'd dared to interrupt. Amusement, possibly, at the sheer audacity of something so small thinking it could intercede. "And you are?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer, and found it hilarious. "Station security," Violet replied, "here to ensure everyone has a productive, incident-free summit experience." "How thoughtful," Zoloth said. "Though, I wonder what security protocol you imagine you could enforce against me, little human." Little human. Violet had been called worse, though usually not by people who were still conscious afterward. She maintained her pleasant expression, the one that had fooled better observers than this overgrown lizard. "The protocol where everyone remains calm and professional," she said. "It's a personal favorite." The Kaharn commander studied her for a long moment, his eyes, which were disconcertingly intelligent despite all the bluster, taking her measure. Then he did something that Violet would later describe in her report as tactically inadvisable and personally offensive. He grabbed her wrist, not gently, not in a let-me-guide-you-aside sort of gesture. Zoloth's clawed hand clamped around Violet's wrist with the kind of pressure that was meant to grind bone, to make a point, to demonstrate exactly how easy it would be to snap this fragile human thing in half if he felt like it. His fingers, each one thick as a baton, tightened, and his expression shifted into something smug, expectant, waiting for the cry of pain, the flinch, the acknowledgement of his superiority. He got approximately 1.5 seconds to enjoy that feeling. Violet moved. Her free hand came up, thumb driving into the pressure point just below Zoloth's wrist, with the precision of someone who'd spent 10,000 hours learning exactly where every species kept their vulnerabilities. Simultaneously, she rotated her captured wrist inward, not fighting the grip, but using it, while her body dropped and pivoted. Physics is a beautiful thing. Leverage is its favorite child. The Kaharn commander's own grip became the anchor point for his downfall. Violet's rotation, combined with the pressure point strike, created a cascade of nerve signals that the Kaharn nervous system interpreted as something has gone catastrophically wrong. His fingers spasmed open for just a fraction of a second, which was exactly long enough for Violet to thread her arm through, lock his elbow joint at an angle nature had never intended, and drive her shoulder into the back of his knee. Zoloth went down like a collapsing building. The sound he made, somewhere between a roar and a yelp, echoed through the suddenly silent atrium. His knees hit the polished floor with a crack that made several delegates wince, and then he was just there, kneeling, with a human woman barely half his size controlling his entire arm, with a grip that looked casual, but was absolutely, definitely not. "Huh," Violet said conversationally, as if she'd just noticed something mildly interesting. "Would you look at that?" She applied the tiniest bit of additional pressure. Not enough to break anything, but enough to make it very clear that breaking things was extremely on the table. And Zoloth's attempt to surge back to his feet died before it began. A strangled sound escaped his throat, something that might have been a word if words weren't currently too painful to form. The three Kaharn warriors behind him moved, hands going to weapons, but then stopped, frozen by the sheer impossibility of what they were seeing. Their commander, the strongest among them, the warrior who'd personally killed predators on 6 different death worlds, was on his knees making noises that suggested he'd just discovered what real pain felt like. Violet kept her eyes on Zoloth, but her voice carried. "Anyone else feeling like making sudden movements? Because I've got both hands free, and I'm an excellent multitasker." Nobody moved. The atrium had gone so quiet, you could hear the atmospheric processors humming. "Here's the thing about humans," Violet said, her tone pleasant, almost educational. "We're not built tough like you, Commander. You're absolutely right about that. We break easy. Our bones snap. Our skin tears. We've got all our important bits, just kind of hanging out there, hoping nothing goes wrong." She shifted her grip slightly. Zoloth made a sound like air escaping from a damaged hull. "But see, that's actually our whole deal. We're fragile, so we got creative. We learned to use tools, to use leverage, to use physics against things bigger and meaner than us. We learned to find the weak spots, the pressure points, the places where even the toughest armor has gaps." Another micro-adjustment. Zoloth tried to speak, but managed only a wheeze. "We learned to be persistence hunters. You know what that means? It means we chase things until they die of exhaustion. We don't have to be faster or stronger. We just have to refuse to stop. It's kind of our species' defining trait, really. We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten." Violet glanced up at Theo, who was watching with an expression that managed to combine concern with deep, profound satisfaction. "Ambassador, you still needed for that briefing?" "I suspect the briefing can wait," Theo said carefully. "Though perhaps it's time to demonstrate that humanity prefers diplomacy to alternative measures." "Good call." Violet looked back down at Zoloth. "Commander, I'm going to release you now. I need to know you're going to stay calm and professional. Can you do that for me? Blink twice for yes." Zoloth blinked. Once. Then, after what seemed like an internal struggle, twice more. "Outstanding." Violet released the lock smoothly, stepping back with the kind of distance calculation that suggested she'd mapped every possible counterattack and had responses ready for all of them. The Kaharn commander remained kneeling for a moment, his arm hanging at his side, his breathing harsh and ragged. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet, towering over Violet once again. His face was unreadable, scaled features revealing nothing of what was happening behind those intelligent eyes. The entire atrium held its breath. Zoloth looked down at Violet. She looked up at him, completely unbothered, like she'd just finished watering plants instead of putting a warrior twice her size through an involuntary religious experience. Then the Kaharn commander did something nobody expected. He laughed, not the mocking sound from before. This was different, genuine, surprised, the laugh of someone who'd just had their entire worldview adjusted by force. He rubbed his arm, testing the joint, and his expression shifted into something that might have been respect, if respect could look dangerous. "I have trained for 60 of your years," Zoloth said slowly. "I have fought in 12 campaigns, across 9 systems. I have killed things that haunt your species' nightmares. He paused, flexing his fingers. And you put me down in less time than it takes to draw breath. Yeah, well, Violet shrugged, I'm pretty good at my job. How? The question came from the scarred female Kaharn, who'd moved closer with an expression of intense focus. How did you move so fast? How did you know where to strike? Practice, Violet said simply. Lots and lots of practice. Humans might not have natural weapons, but we've had roughly 10,000 generations to figure out how to fight things that do. We got good at it. Zoloth rotated his arm again, and something like wonder crossed his face. That technique, it used my own strength against me. The harder I gripped, the more effective your counter became. Yep, we call it physics. It's neat. The Kaharn commander looked at his warriors, then back at Violet, and something shifted in the atmosphere. The hostility hadn't vanished, but it had transformed into something else. Something that looked almost like curiosity. I wish to learn this, Zoloth said abruptly. Human Violet. I formally request instruction in your combat methods. That's... Violet blinked. Sorry, what now? My people respect strength, the commander continued, his posture straightening into something that looked almost formal. You have demonstrated strength in a way I did not anticipate. This is worthy of study. I would be instructed by you. He wants you to teach him how you just kicked his ass, Theo translated helpfully, which is, I have to say, not the direction I expected this to go. Around the atrium, other delegates were beginning to recover from their shock, and the whispers started like rustling leaves. Violet could see representatives from at least a dozen species muttering into communication devices, undoubtedly reporting back to their governments that humans were apparently not the harmless pushovers everyone had assumed. Violet looked at Zoloth, then at Theo, then back at the Kaharn commander, who was now regarding her with the intensity of someone who'd just discovered a new favorite topic. I need to clear this with my chain of command, she said finally. But sure, why not? Though I'm gonna need you to sign a waiver because, and I cannot stress this enough, human combat training is designed to be painful. Zoloth's expression suggested that pain was exactly what he was hoping for. This, Violet thought, is going to make one hell of a report. The news spread through Lumina Station like a virus, except faster and with more dramatic retellings. Within an hour, every delegation had heard some version of the story. Within 3 hours, there were at least 15 different accounts, ranging from mostly accurate to completely unhinged. By the time the station's rotation brought them to the evening cycle, Violet had somehow been upgraded to a mythical warrior goddess in half the retellings and downgraded to a lucky amateur in the others. The truth, as usual, was somewhere in the middle and far more interesting. Violet sat in the security office, filling out the incident report she'd hoped to avoid, when her commanding officer, a human named Lieutenant Commander Perry, who'd been doing station security longer than Violet had been alive, leaned against the doorframe with an expression of mingled amusement and exhaustion. So, Perry said, you put the Kaharn commander on the floor. In my defense, Violet replied, without looking up from her screen, he grabbed me first. I'm not criticizing. I'm just trying to figure out how to write this up in a way that doesn't make it sound like we're deliberately antagonizing visiting dignitaries. Self-defense? Against someone twice your size who's also technically got diplomatic immunity. Violet finally looked up. Sir, with respect, diplomatic immunity doesn't include the right to assault station personnel. If it did, this job would be significantly worse than it already is. Perry snorted. Fair point. Anyway, you've got a problem. Just one? The Kaharn aren't the only ones who want demonstrations now. I've had formal requests from the Forians, the Feln, 2 independent merchant guilds, and something called the Olmec Collective that I'd never even heard of until today. Everyone wants to know what else humans can do that they don't know about. Violet felt a headache beginning to form behind her eyes. You're joking. I am many things, Lieutenant. Funny is not one of them. Perry straightened up. The Admiral wants you to do a demonstration match with Zoloth. Public, controlled environment, full safety protocols. Show the galaxy that what happened wasn't a fluke. That's insane. That's politics. Perry gave her a sympathetic look. You put us on the map today, Violet. Now we've got to show everyone the map's accurate. Match is scheduled for tomorrow at 1400 hours in the main gymnasium. Try not to permanently injure our new biggest fan. After Perry left, Violet sat in silence for a moment, contemplating the chain of events that had led to this particular flavor of nightmare. Then she pulled up her personal files and started reviewing combat footage, because if she was going to make a spectacle of herself, she was at least going to make it educational. The gymnasium had been converted into something resembling a gladiatorial arena, which Violet felt was a bit much, but apparently, when you spontaneously demonstrated that humanity wasn't as helpless as everyone thought, people got theatrical about it. The observation deck was packed. Every species represented at the summit had sent delegates, plus what looked like half the station's civilian population, because apparently watching aliens fight was quality entertainment regardless of what planet you came from. Violet stood in the makeshift ring, just a matted area with boundary markers, wearing the standard-issue training gear that suddenly felt extremely insufficient. Across from her, Zoloth waited, and if she'd had any illusions about him going easy on her, his expression crushed them immediately. This was a warrior who'd taken his defeat personally and was determined to prove it was a fluke. Ambassador Theo stood near the edge, speaking into a microphone for the benefit of the universal translators everyone was wearing. For those just joining us, this is a demonstration match between Commander Zoloth of the Kaharn Empire and Lieutenant Violet of Earth. Standard rules apply. No lethal techniques. Match continues until one party yields or is rendered unable to continue. Medical teams are standing by. Try not to die, Harry murmured from the sidelines. The paperwork would be astronomical. Your concern is touching, sir, Violet muttered back. Zoloth stepped forward, and the crowd noise dropped to absolute silence. He'd removed his formal armor, revealing the corded muscle and scaled hide underneath. He looked like something evolution had designed specifically to ruin someone's day. Human Violet, he said formally, you have my respect for yesterday's technique. Today, I am prepared. Show me what your kind can truly do. Violet took a breath, rolled her shoulders, and moved into a ready stance. Okay, but remember, you asked for this. The match coordinator, a nervous Forian who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, raised one chitinous arm. Begin! Zoloth didn't charge. He'd learned at least that much. Instead, he moved forward carefully, testing distance, watching for tells. He was being smart, tactical, using his brain instead of just his muscle. That was going to make this harder. They circled each other, and Violet could feel hundreds of eyes watching, analyzing, judging. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about humanity, about whether they deserved to be taken seriously or dismissed as a fluke species that got lucky once. No pressure. Zoloth feinted left, then swept in from the right, his arm moving in a grab that would have caught most opponents off guard. Violet slipped it, redirected his momentum, but he'd anticipated the counter and reversed, his other hand coming up in a strike that would have taken her head off if it connected. She ducked, felt the air displacement as his hand passed overhead, and drove an elbow into his midsection. It was like hitting a wall made of leather and bad decisions. Zoloth grunted but didn't slow, his legs sweeping out in a move that forced Violet to jump back or lose her footing. The crowd was making noise now, excited chittering and bellowing from multiple species. This was closer than yesterday, more competitive, and everyone could see it. Good. Let them watch. Violet fainted high, went low, and when Zoloth's guard dropped to protect his legs, she was already moving, using his own thigh as a springboard to vault up and lock her legs around his neck. The shock on his face was almost worth the risk as she twisted, using her entire body weight to torque his head to the side. For one glorious moment, she thought she had him. Then his hands came up, grabbed her legs, and she realized he'd been practicing since yesterday because his grip avoided the nerve clusters she'd exploited before. Fast learner. Fantastic. He slammed her toward the mat. Violet released the hold rather than let herself be used as a hammer, tucked into a roll, and came up just in time to catch his follow-up strike on her forearms. Pain bloomed up her arms. The Kaharn hit like freight trains with anger management issues, but she used the force to spin away, creating distance. You adapt quickly, Zoloth said, breathing harder now. Good. You too, Violet replied, shaking out her arms. This would be easier if you were dumber. He laughed, that genuine sound from yesterday, and came at her again. They traded exchanges for another 2 minutes that felt like 2 hours. Violet scored hits that would have dropped a human in seconds, but only seemed to annoy the Kaharn. Zoloth landed strikes that would have killed most species, but Violet rolled with them, redirected them, refused to let them land clean. She was faster. He was stronger. It was a math problem written in violence, and they were both trying to solve it first. Then Zoloth made a mistake. Tiny thing, really. He overextended on a punch, left his back foot planted wrong. Violet saw the opening like a door swinging wide, and she went through it, her entire body becoming a lever that used his own structure against him. She trapped his arm, pivoted, and took him down with a throw that sent him crashing to the mat hard enough to make the floor shake. She followed him down, locked the submission, and waited. 3 seconds. 5. 10. Yield! Zoloth gasped. Violet released him immediately and stepped back, offering a hand. He stared at it for a moment, then took it, letting her help him up, despite the fact that he outweighed her by at least 200 pounds. The gymnasium erupted in noise, not just cheering, analysis, arguments, excited babbling in a dozen languages. Violet could see delegates gesturing wildly, replaying what they'd seen, trying to understand. Zoloth rubbed his shoulder, his expression thoughtful. You are better than yesterday. I didn't want to embarrass you in front of your people twice, Violet said. Seemed rude. You showed mercy. The Kaharn commander's eyes narrowed. Why? Because this isn't a death match, Commander. It's a demonstration. You asked to learn, so I'm teaching. Lesson 1. Knowing when to stop is as important as knowing how to fight. Before Zoloth could respond, another voice cut through the noise, crystalline and strange, coming from a section of the observation deck Violet hadn't paid much attention to. Fascinating, the voice said, and suddenly every eye turned toward the speaker. They looked like someone had carved a person out of living gemstone, all facets and angles and light, bending in ways that hurt to look at directly. Their form was vaguely humanoid but alien in ways that made you question what counted as a body. The Ulmec, the species Perry had mentioned, the ones nobody knew much about, because they mostly kept to themselves in the outer reaches. The crystalline being descended from the observation deck with movements that defied conventional physics, flowing more than walking. "Lieutenant Violet," they said, their voice somehow coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Commander Zoloth, thank you for that demonstration. It confirms much of our research." "Research?" Theo stepped forward, his diplomat instincts clearly pinging something. "What research would that be?" The Olmec turned toward him, light refracting through their form. "We are Hiksal, representing the Olmec Collective. We have been studying humanity for some time now, and this display has proven several hypotheses." "That's not at all ominous," Violet muttered. Hiksal made a sound like wind chimes in a storm, possibly laughter. "Not ominous, merely thorough. You see, humanity is unique, not in the way you imagine, but in ways that are statistically improbable to the point of concern." "Concern?" Theo's tone sharpened. "What kind of concern?" "The kind where we must recalculate galactic threat assessments," Hiksal said pleasantly. "May we show you something?" Without waiting for an answer, Hiksal gestured, and suddenly the air above the gymnasium floor filled with holographic displays. Images, videos, data streams, all of it showing humans. Humans in combat zones. Humans surviving situations that should have killed them. Humans doing extreme sports that looked suicidal to every species watching. "This," Hiksal said, pointing to a video of a human free-climbing a cliff face with no safety equipment, "is what you call recreation, fun. Many species have similar activities, but none pursue them with such enthusiasm for risk." Another image. Human soldiers continuing to fight with injuries that would have incapacitated most species. "Your pain tolerance is abnormal. Your adrenal response allows you to function beyond reasonable physiological limits. You have documented cases of individuals performing impossible feats of strength under stress. Mothers lifting vehicles to save offspring. Warriors fighting for hours with fatal wounds." More images. Human history. Warfare. Survival stories. The Donner Party. Shackleton's Antarctic expedition. Swimmers crossing impossible distances. Climbers summiting death zones. "You are persistence hunters who never learn to stop hunting," Hiksal continued. "You are social pack animals who bond with anything, including species that should be your predators. You are fragile, yes, but you refuse to acknowledge that fragility as a limitation." The gallery had gone silent again, watching the cascade of human achievement and human insanity playing out in holographic glory. "You scare us," Hiksal said simply. "Not because you are strong, but because you will not stop. Ever. You chase your prey until it dies of exhaustion. You survive situations that should end you. You befriend species that want to eat you. You are, and please understand, this is meant as objective analysis, not insult. You are collectively insane by galactic standards." Violet looked at Theo. Theo looked at Violet. They both looked at Hiksal. "Huh," Violet said finally. "I mean, fair?" The silence in the gymnasium stretched long enough to get uncomfortable. Every delegate, every observer, every being present was processing what Hiksal had just laid out. A species-wide psychological evaluation that basically amounted to, "Humans are terrifying and don't even realize it." Theo cleared his throat, slipping back into diplomat mode like pulling on a comfortable jacket. "Hiksal, on behalf of humanity, I appreciate the thorough analysis, though I feel compelled to point out that collectively insane might be a slight exaggeration." "Is it?" Hiksal's form shifted, colors rippling through the crystalline structure. You have individuals who jump from aircraft for entertainment. You have competitions to see who can endure the most pain. You have documented instances of humans bonding emotionally with cleaning robots. Those robots have names and personalities, someone in the crowd called out. Sounded like one of the human engineers. You prove my point, HFY said, almost gently. Zoloth, who'd been watching the holographic display with increasing fascination, stepped forward. His earlier aggression had transformed entirely into something that looked like respect, mixed with healthy caution. The way you'd regard a small predator that turned out to be way more dangerous than its size suggested. This explains much, the Kaharn commander said slowly. Human Violet, when you fought me, you were not using your full capability, were you? Violet shifted uncomfortably. I mean, it wasn't a real fight, just a demonstration. That is not an answer. She sighed. No, Commander, that wasn't full capability. That was controlled, safe, demonstration-level engagement. Real combat is different. How different? Different enough that we have entire sections in our military code of conduct about proportional response and rules of engagement specifically to prevent us from going too far. Humans can be very creative about violence when properly motivated, and that creativity needs guardrails or things get ugly fast. Another ripple of unease went through the assembled delegates. Violet could practically see the recalculations happening. Threat assessments being revised, defense protocols being reconsidered, trade agreements suddenly looking more attractive than military confrontation. But here's the thing, Violet continued, her voice carrying to the upper decks. Everything HFY showed you, all that persistence hunting, pain tolerance, refusal to quit, that's not about aggression. That's about survival. Humans didn't evolve to be warriors. We evolved to not die. There's a difference. She gestured to the holographic images still floating in the air. Yeah, we climb mountains and jump out of aircraft and do all sorts of objectively stupid things. But that's because we spent hundreds of thousands of generations learning that the only way to survive was to push limits, test boundaries, figure out what was actually impossible versus what just seemed impossible. Theo picked up the thread smoothly. Lieutenant Violet is correct. Humanity's defining characteristic isn't violence, it's adaptability. We don't want to fight. We want to explore, create, build relationships. But if survival requires us to fight, we've got the tools for that too. It's a package deal. A terrifying package, muttered a Feln delegate. Perhaps, Theo acknowledged. But consider this. Every species here has survival traits. The Kaharn have strength and regeneration. The Feln have rapid reproduction and hive coordination. The Forians have exoskeletons and chemical defenses. Humanity has stubbornness and the ability to make friends with literally anything. And combat capability that exceeds your apparent physical limitations, Zoloth added. He looked at Violet with something that might have been curiosity. You said I was not fighting at your full capability. What is full capability for human warriors? Violet hesitated, glancing at Perry, who gave her a tiny nod. Permission to speak freely, apparently. I'm good at my job, Commander, but I'm not exceptional by human standards. I'm a security officer with standard military training. If you want scary, don't meet our Special Operations Forces, the ones trained specifically for high-risk combat. Don't meet our competitive athletes, who've optimized their bodies and skills for peak performance. And definitely, absolutely, do not threaten anything a human considers family. Why not? This from HFY, genuine curiosity in their crystalline voice. Because humans are pack animals, Violet said quietly. We bond, hard. And when something threatens our pack, our family, our friends, our adopted cleaning robots, we stop calculating odds and start calculating how to eliminate threats. There are documented cases of human parents fighting off predators that outweighed them by hundreds of pounds to protect their children. Of soldiers holding positions against impossible odds to buy time for evacuation. We don't do rational math when our pack is threatened. We do whatever it takes. The gymnasium had gone very, very quiet again. So, yes, Violet continued, we're fragile. Yes, we break easily. But we also refuse to stay broken. We patch ourselves up, we adapt, we learn, and we keep going. That's what makes us human. Not strength, not speed, not natural weapons. Just the absolute refusal to accept that we're beaten. Zoloth was nodding slowly, processing. Then he did something unexpected. He placed his clawed hand over his chest in what was clearly a formal Kaharn salute. Human Violet, I withdraw my earlier assessment of your species. You are not weak. You are dangerous in ways I had not considered. This is worthy of respect. He turned to address the entire gathering, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard. Let it be known that the Kaharn Empire recognizes humanity as a warrior species, not for their physical strength, but for their refusal to yield. This is the mark of true warriors. Well, Theo said into the stunned silence that followed, that's going in the summit record. Hixal's form shifted through several colors. We should perhaps discuss what this means for the trade agreements and territorial negotiations, given this new understanding of human capabilities. It means, Theo said firmly, that humanity would prefer partnerships based on mutual respect rather than assumptions about weakness or strength. We didn't come to this summit to prove we could fight. We came to prove we could cooperate. Even better, one of the Forian delegates called out. You can do both. Laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous at first, then more genuine. The tension that had been building since Hixal's revelation began to ease, replaced by something that felt almost like understanding. Violet stepped back, letting the diplomats do their job now that the dramatic demonstrations were over. Perry appeared at her elbow, looking simultaneously proud and exhausted. That went better than expected, he said quietly. Sir, I put a foreign military commander on the ground twice in 2 days. In what universe is that better than expected? The universe where it resulted in a formal declaration of respect from a species that's been dismissing us for 3 days straight. Plus, trade negotiations are apparently back on track. And I'm hearing rumors that at least 5 species want to open formal dialogue about mutual defense agreements. Perry shrugged. You grabbed the galaxy's attention, Violet. What happens next is up to the people who get paid more than us. Across the gymnasium, Zoloth was speaking with his delegation, gesturing animatedly. The scarred female Kaharn kept looking over at Violet with an expression that suggested she also wanted training, which was flattering and terrifying in equal measure. Hixal drifted closer, their crystalline form refracting the gymnasium lights into rainbow patterns. Lieutenant Violet, one question, if I may. Sure? You mentioned that you are not exceptional by human standards. Does that mean there are humans significantly more capable than yourself? Violet thought about the special operations soldiers she'd trained with, the martial arts masters who'd forgotten more about combat than she'd ever learn, the athletes who treated the human body like a machine that just needed the right programming, the everyday parents who'd performed impossible feats to save their kids. Yeah, she said simply. There are humans way scarier than me. I'm just the one who happened to be standing in the right place when someone made a bad decision. Terrifying, Hixal said, but they sounded almost amused. Absolutely terrifying. Your species will fit in well here, I think. The galaxy needs more unpredictability. As the delegates began filing out, already deep in animated discussions about what they'd witnessed, Violet finally let herself relax. Her arms ached from blocking Kaharn's strikes, her shoulders protested every movement, and she was pretty sure she'd have spectacular bruises tomorrow. But the look of respect in Zoloth's eyes, the way the other species were regarding humans now, not as prey animals or inferior beings, but as equals, that made the pain worth it. Theo approached, smiling broadly. "Lieutenant, on behalf of humanity and this diplomatic mission, thank you. You've done more for our galactic reputation in 2 days than I could have accomplished in 2 years. I just didn't want to get grabbed, sir. And in refusing to be grabbed, you changed everything." Theo's smile widened. "Though I have to ask, what you said about not being at full capability, how much were you holding back?" Violet considered the question, considered the truth that real combat was faster, uglier, and involved techniques specifically designed to end threats permanently. That her training included methods she'd never use in a demonstration because they couldn't be done safely. That humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of survival by any means necessary. "Enough," she said finally. "More than enough." Theo nodded, understanding what she wasn't saying. "Good. Let's hope they never have to find out exactly how much." As they left the gymnasium, Violet caught one last glimpse of the holographic displays Hicksal had generated. Humans climbing, running, fighting, surviving, refusing to quit, even when quitting made sense. It was a greatest hits compilation of human stubbornness, and somehow it had become their calling card. One grabbed wrist, one moment of refusing to be intimidated. That's all it took to change the galaxy's perception of an entire species. Not bad for a random shift in station security. Though next time, Violet thought, she was definitely requesting hazard pay.